we're gonna call it to order, and we've got welcomes and introductions, so we'll start right with Steve Dale, because he's over there, and we'll go this way, Steve.
Okay. I'm Steve Dale. I live in Montpelier, and I'm here to try to help you do this task, which we'll review in a few minutes.
And I'm Stephen John, the superintendent of schools. And I've just passed out the agenda. I have other copies, and I'll be passing out now a printed copy of the Brainstorm session from last time regarding criteria for evaluating any things you're considering.
Dave Sklar, Wardsboro.
Jennifer Jordan Duque, Jamaica.
Stephanie Amio, Jamaica.
Douglas Core, Barbaro. Al Clausen, Townsend.
Emily, introduce yourself.
Emily Long, Leland and Gray, Newfit.
Rich Warner, Dover.
Bill Antone, Dover. Chip Vickery, Dover.
Dot Maggio, Brookline.
Howard Iris, Leland and Gray from Wyndham.
I'm Hugh Rupert, Wyndham.
Sir. Our recording secretary, say hi.
Peter Barris.
In the back.
Nancy Dyke, Wyndham.
Jerry Dyke, Wyndham.
Oliver Olson, State Rep.
You wanna identify yourself really quick?
Corinne Dorfman, Principal Julian Gray.
I think we got everybody, right? Oh, I'm sorry, Joe.
Joe Winrick. What are we telling everyone? I'm on the Leland and Gray board. I'm from Townsend. And I'm trying to get Laura.
Okay, so Steve, I think it's from down here on out, it's yours.
All right.
We have the phones.
Evening, everybody.
Yep.
There's a habit that's emerging here, and maybe a habit's not the right term, but a pattern. The last time you met was the 24th of February, I think, and it was about 32 degrees. It was snowing up north. It was sort of snowing half here and kind of nasty on the back roads. And it's been like 75 or whatever it's been for about 2 weeks. And then tonight it was mostly fine, except between here and Grafton. It was a little tricky on the back roads, which I'm sure you all cover all the time. Hopefully I think the next meeting of this group is scheduled for the 18th of April. And it ought to be in the news zone by that time, I hope. Just to see a show of hands, how many of you were present the last time we met? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And how many were not here the last time? Okay, so this is what we're going to try to do is just keep moving ahead. I don't know, did people have a chance to either get information or look at the last meeting? Those of you that were not here the last time?
Yep.
If you're feeling like we're somewhere where you're not comfortable, we can do a little bit of a quick review. We'll try to just to keep moving forward because there's relatively few meetings and relatively little time, so we won't try to sort of go back and review each time, but we can stop if we need to just touch base on some of the information we discussed the last time. Just to restate for those of you that were not here the last time, this is your committee. There's a charge which we'll talk about for this committee. My job is to try to work with you to help you get to a place that responds to the charge that you've been given. This is not by any stretch my meeting or my agenda. It's my job is to try to help you get there and to continue to try to help focus so that you can actually get to a product. This is a complicated business. This is a complicated region of the state. There's nothing simple about any of this, and so it's easy to find yourself sort of in a perpetual state of trying to figure it out or sort it out. And so again, part of my job will be to continue to help you focus to get to the end product. The charge that we talked about the last time, which we had up on the sheet, but I'm going to read it to you, and if there's anybody who doesn't believe this is the charge of this committee, please raise it so we can talk it through.
Steve, I got a quick question.
Yes.
Do we need to approve the minutes of the last?
It probably would make sense for you to go ahead and have that approval before we move into this next phase. Sure, why don't you go ahead and do that?
Okay, so did everybody get a chance to look at the minutes? They were sent out pretty quick. Peter's doing a really good job with that. So If there's no issues, could somebody just make a motion and you get a second to approve them? And identify who's making the motion in second, please.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the February 24th meeting.
Yep, and do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. You got Bruce from Marlboro and Joe from Leland Gray Town, Doug, I'm sorry, why did I think Bruce? That's why Emily always sits next to me to correct me
I
on.
didn't correct her. I'm dropping my duty.
Uh-oh. All those in favor say aye?
Aye.
Okay. Sorry, Steve, go ahead.
No problem, okay. So let me just read this charge that we talked about at the last meeting. To consider the goals and provisions of Act 46 and to recommend to the school boards of the Wyndham Central Supervisory Union actions that might be taken in a coordinated way to maximize benefits for students, taxpayers, and communities. Shooting for a target date of mid to late May to have that done. So let me just restate what that means from my understanding. The reason to have a committee like this is because ultimately these decisions, the decisions under Act 46 are district decisions. Each district has to decide what it's going to do or not do. If everybody, and I believe there's, what, 10 different ones of you here, if each of the 10 of you do this totally independently, it will be a much more complex process to try to maximize the benefits for all of those parties than if you do something in a coordinated fashion. So the goal is for this group to come up with a proposed structure within which each board needs to make its decision. So in other words, if this group could say, you know something, ideally we would create 3 study committees, because the product of this process would be the creation of some study committees, which then takes this conversation to a whole different level. And those committees should look like A, B, C, and D. Then each board has to decide whether it wants to participate in those study committees. If those are not orchestrated, it will be very tough for them to come out the other end looking like they make any sense. And secondly, the potential financial incentives require you to coordinate on these issues. So for example, if you decided you were going to create one non-operating district, one elementary, middle school operating district, and one pre-K to 12 operating district, if those don't all come to be on the same date, then you don't get the benefits. You don't get the benefits of what has been called sometimes a side-by-side organization that would be created afterwards. So, in other words, you may decide to do any or all of that. You may decide even to do them on different dates. But if you're not planning together, you may eliminate the possibility of creating those kinds of structures within the allotted time in order to get the incentives. So the purpose of this committee was to try to come up with a general plan. You're not committing, by being in this room and by May trying to agree to a proposal that people can either buy into or not, you are not committing for your board or for your community that we are going to do X, Y, or Z. What you're saying is that given what you know about school boards, given what you know about your town, given the objectives that we will be talking about relative to your kids and your community and your taxpayers, this approach makes sense to you. That's what you're trying to come up with. And then each board has to work within that. So the hope would be that you can get there by the end of May, or ideally the middle of May. So that the charge then is to make a recommendation to the boards in this community, in this within this SU. We also talked the last time, again, because half of you weren't here, the issue did get raised about your neighbors to the south. I guess you've got neighbors south, east, west, maybe even north, I don't know, who have some interest in interconnecting. We decided last time not to, and when I say we, you all decided not to expand the conversation to include this exploratory committee, to include all those different boards from outside the area. But we did agree that because in some instances, There may be natural partnerships that will become compelling or that you're going to raise as compelling possibilities. We need to be open to the idea of, okay, so at some point, you may want to, we may need to go there. But it's certainly is a challenge having 10 towns all trying to agree on a general direction, let alone trying to get into 20 or 30 towns, which potentially could, or maybe 15. So the agenda for tonight, if you all, and I'm just going to steal this version of it, is as follows. I wanted to start off with updates from the last meeting. Evening, Laura. You're better in person than coming out of the sky. The first thing we want to do is do some updates. I've talked to some of you individually about particular issues that are coming out of your particular communities. I think it's important to get those issues on the table and have everybody sort of get up to date. There was this small thing called town meeting since the last time we met, and I know there's been lots of discussions in your local community. So we're going to do that first. We're then going to go back to the criteria that we started with. Several of you have sent proposed changes or additions in the criteria. We're going to add those, and we want to reopen that conversation to make sure that we've done a comprehensive look at the criteria. What are you trying to accomplish with any structural change you make? How will you know you've succeeded when you get there? That's the nature of that criteria discussion. We're then going to shift gears. We're not going to try to finalize that discussion tonight because some of you, this is your first time sitting at this table, and this stuff takes some time to percolate. So we will get the criteria list more fully developed, but we're not going to try to finalize it tonight. We're then going to move on to the discussion to begin to talk about the possible structural options that are on the table. And it's going to be a wide open conversation to identify all the possibilities. We're not going to scrutinize them. We're not going to sort of rule out things tonight. What we're going to do is try to get the full range of the options that are on the table for this full region. And that'll be an interesting task in and of itself because there are many options. Then the big question is, what do we need before the April meeting in order to both finalize the criteria but also to begin to winnow down the range of options? We'll then have another month after that before we come back in May to try to come to some conclusions about which options can best achieve the criteria that we develop. So that's the basic outline for tonight. Questions or comments about the approach or the agenda? Yeah, Howard?
So just to get it straight, this group then will recommend study groups to local boards, which will then make recommendations to school boards, which will then make recommendations to the towns, which will finally vote on whether we merge school boards.
Yes, yeah. Your general point is well taken. There's a lot of steps to this process. It's not exactly as you said it. Basically, this group has no legal authority. Basically, what you've decided as an SU to do is come together and try to take on this task of how might we approach Act 46 in the interests of students, taxpayers, and communities in this region. So you'll do this. So you'll try to come up with some kind of general idea. Then each board has to decide through whatever vehicle they want to, whether they just decided at a board meeting or whether they want community meetings and whatever they want to do, to decide, do they want to sign up, in essence, sign on to the plan that you've put together, and which aspect do you want to do it? What we made clear the last time is that that is the moment when your board votes to join a study committee, that you've created a new legal entity that is called a study committee that will then spend a lot more time digging deeply into the issues that we talk about here on a fairly quick basis to decide whether, in fact, creating a unified district of any kind makes sense. That committee creates a plan that goes back to the school boards, not for approval, but for comment, because the committees that you create actually have the legal authority and obligation to decide whether to put something before your voters. And ultimately, your voters will have to buy into whatever that plan is. So you know, we'll keep, as we get closer to the end, we'll talk more about all those details. But at this point, really, it's the big concepts of what can you all get your heads around in terms of something that feels right to you, that you can then recommend that your boards engage with. So there's a lot of decision points along the way, and this committee is really providing, the way I describe it is, I mean, you'll be providing leadership for your boards because it's so confusing and there's so many dead ends and so much, there's a lot of misinformation and a lot of stuff. What you're really trying to do is get to a place where you can explain to your community, these are the options that we looked at, this is what we're recommending, these are the specific recommendations we suggest you engage with now, and then it gives them a better opportunity to make a decision within that context. Not entirely clear, but hopefully it gives you enough of a sense of what we're trying to do. Any other questions on this? Okay, so let's start off with updates. And at the last meeting, we went around the table, and every community shared basically where you are. And different people have done different things. Some of you have created subcommittees. Some of you have had community meetings. Some of you have basically talked a lot in your board meetings. Given the fact that you had town meeting, given the fact that there's been a number of additional local discussions since the last time we met, and given the specific questions that some of you have raised with me, I know Newfane sent us, Newbrook sent us a specific written document, which I think may have gone to everybody, but so I wanted to give you guys the chance to present your thinking from that. I know Jamaica has some additional information they'd like to put on the table. I just think it's important to just revisit anything new or additional that you want to put on the table from your town. I'm going to kind of try to keep a tight time frame on that because it's the kind of thing that could easily chew up the entire meeting, but I want to make sure it gets out there because some of that information should inform the criteria discussion and the options discussion, which we're going to have. So,
I don't believe I sent Brookline's, Newbrook's, to work to all the boards.
That's fine.
It just happened at last Thursday night meeting, and the direction was to go to Stephen Dale so that we
Right.
could consider it under the criteria tonight.
right, okay. So what I'm going to do is, if there's something about what you share that would inform the criteria discussion, I'll make notes of that so that it moves us forward with the criteria. So we can start wherever you'd like. I mean, do you guys want to start with the Newbrook thinking?
Well, our two boards got together as one board, the two towns, and because we're also the joint board, as you all know. Currently, Newbrook operates on a budget which provides rich experience for students at a cost within the cost per pupil guidelines. We'd like to see a school-by-school comparison on the cost per pupil for those schools indicated in the study. That was one of them. The other one was, well, there were actually 6 altogether. Would like to see a detailed explanation of the spending formula from the state. A detailed one.
So
Yeah.
just say more about spending formula as opposed to tax. You're not talking about the tax formula.
No, spending formula.
You're talking about the allowable growth, that kind of stuff, or something else?
Well, all of it. They want to see, we like numbers in Newfane and Brookline.
Okay, all right.
We would like to survey and to learn more about the opportunities and programs and learning attractions that would draw more students from the private sector back to the public sector. You know, they have a lot of schools that are
Right.
individualized in arts and so on and so forth. What are we missing in public education that the private sector has? Also, we'd like to maintain the student-teacher ratio that is currently in place and working for us at our school, which I think is probably the best in the district. We have, was it about 17 to 1? Is that about right?
I don't think it's quite that high, but it's the highest in the district.
Yeah.
You got that. That's why your tax rate's the lowest.
Right. We'd like to discuss any building improvements or renovations that may be needed or currently being made in the other schools that may be combined. For example, we have a solar field going up. We just took out I don't want to say a bond, a loan for $380,000 or so for a new air-to-air exchange system. We're hopefully going to be the greenest school in Vermont, maybe even New England. We also, most importantly, we want to see, we'd like to ensure that any proposals that this committee comes up with will include an equal or better clause to what we already have. We don't want to lose what we have. And I can give you a couple examples of that if you'd like. One of them is the Key-Waden program, which is a 4-night, 5-day program up north at an environmental camp, and that is actually part of our budget, where I believe the rest of any other schools that go there, they all fundraise to go. I don't believe it's part of anybody else's budget, and we'd like to keep it in the budget.
Okay.
Okay, that's one. And the other ones are, we have the nurse in the building twice as much as any other district. We have guidance in there twice as much as any other district. We don't want to lose those things that we feel are important.
Right. So, is that it?
Yeah.
Okay. So let me just comment on a couple of these things, and just give them some context, and we'll move on to the next. I mean, one of the concerns that you guys will have, and by the way, I'm sure that each of you, if you were to do the similar process, you'd have certain things that you'd want to make sure are taken into account in thinking about coming together with others. Cost per pupil, I mean, that one of the goals of this thing should be that you're able to manage your cost per pupil in a reasonable fashion, and you guys think of yours as kind of the benchmark for perhaps for the rest of the district. But certainly the general principle ought to be a principle that everybody's concerned about. Student-teacher ratio, you may disagree about what's an acceptable student-teacher ratio. The law specifically says one of the purposes of Act 46 is to manage a decline in student enrollment, and specifically to try to better be able to manage student-teacher ratio without harming education quality. So clearly that should be front and center in your conversations. This one, I think, it's a great point, because people talk about equity a lot in the legislature. A lot of this is about equity. You got kids that are really getting the short end of the stick, and other people who will get probably a better education than anybody in the country. If you're going to come together, one of your criteria, what you're proposing should be that one is you're not achieving equity by bringing everybody down to the least common denominator. That whatever you design you ought to have a pretty good assurance that this is about raising the bar for everybody. Some of you probably have top of the line programming in this area. The goal shouldn't be to bring somebody else up over here by destroying something great that's been created. So there's a better way to write this, but I think that's a great criteria to add to the list. The business about spending formula, I think I'll wait and talk about that a little later, because one of the things that you probably should have before the next meeting is maybe a first look at some hypotheticals about what the impact of different scenarios might be on your tax rates. Again, I need to better understand what you're specifically asking for, but there are a variety of, when you meld a school district, a number of school districts, your cost per student gets mushed together, and so some people are going to go up, some people are going to go down. I assume that's all part of the concern that you're talking about, and we certainly can begin to model what some of that might look like. Okay, so should we move on? Let's see who else had contacted. Jamaica. Yes.
Okay, so Jamaica, we had our committee. We have 4 committees that are studying the 4 options that we've sort of come to as possibilities, and our 4 committees presented at town meeting about what they've done so far. You know, we were really curious what kind of feedback we would get, and mostly what we continue to get is a lot of support for the process that we're going through, a lot of people approving of how we're going about it. You know, the question came up, you know, well, 3 of your 4 options would involve leaving the Leland and Gray Union, and how is that even possible? And yet the responses still were, we want you to go forward anyway, we want to know as a town what we really want before we, you know, whether we think it's realistic or not, we still want to decide as a town what we ideally want. So we're moving forward that way, and we are planning a May 17th meeting at which it'll be a big public meeting similar to the one we did in December. Our committees will lay out all that they've been able to discover, and then we will have some sort of survey or poll, or whatever the right name is, that will help inform the board as we make the decision, and that will let us know which direction they would like us to go. Jennifer is one of our new board members, but she was already on the committees, so she knows a lot about this whole process already. And
Good warm-up.
yeah.
Okay.
You talked about possibly, you know, there's some specific things we need to find out about the process of leaving the Leland and Gray Union, just so that we can report that at the meeting, and so we're looking into avenues for doing that. We did not get our own study grant, which was, you know, frustrating. But we've already done a lot of work, and we're just moving forward with what we've got and doing the best we can.
My suggestion on this is, we're not gonna do it now because I want to make sure we hear from everybody, but before we finish tonight, I'd like to talk about this issue, simply because it's a big one, and it has a significant impact on everybody else not everybody, but some of the people who are here, and on a potential end product. So we should just talk about process, about how best to manage all that. So at the end of the day, when you're talking on May 17th with your town, that there's sort of a sense of where this is all headed with your neighbors, or what the what-ifs might be, because it'll be important to have that all orchestrated, you know, coordinated is probably a better way to put it than
Right.
orchestrated. So I want to come back to that general issue, but thank you. Other things that happened on town meeting day, I just wanted to share one more. Patty Dickinson? Is Patty here? Okay. And Patty's from Wyndham?
Patty's from Jamaica.
She's from Jamaica.
She's on the
Oh,
Leland and Gray
Wyndham
board.
Central is her, yes, I get it. Okay, I'm sorry. Yes, she made one other recommendation on criteria, which I thought was a good one, which is the constant struggle to get community members to run for open positions on the school board. The hope would be that as a result of whatever you do, that it results in a strong, much stronger pull for people to step forward and serve on school boards. Okay, anything else that happened since the time, since the last time we were here? Yes?
From
Which
Marlboro,
Marlboro.
we have been working on a survey, and it has just gone out. We're going to send it out through the little school circulation. We're going to send it up, mail it to every person who gets the so-called Marlboro Mixer, and it's also available online through Survey Gizmo, I think. You know, a volunteer committee always struggles with how to properly formulate these things, and then how to properly assess what you get back, but that's the way we decided to go down this route.
EORO, or?
Yes, correct.
Dan, why don't you
There's a
share
lot of
the timeline on that?
Yeah, so we're hoping to have the results back by April 1st, and that may be unrealistic, but since it has now gone out, we're going to push for that, and we're going to send out as many reminders as we can so that people get their survey back to us. We'll be picking it up paper copies, a couple places, and you can do it online.
So this is a survey trying to get a general sense of the public about what general direction you might go in?
What I'll do is I'll send a copy to Steve, and he can share it with everybody
He did
who might be
circulate it.
interested.
Yeah, he did.
Okay.
I think I saw
I think
it.
I've got it out already, yeah.
And, you know, again, what the volunteer committee does is try to formulate these things so that they aren't push questions, they're not leading questions, but they state one possible scenario and then another one, and people get to sort of choose amongst them. So anyway, you can all
Right.
take a look at it and see.
Thank you.
what you think.
And we do have one official new board member and 2 legitimized board members. We appointed, we appointed 2.
Finally, a legitimate
Back in January, we held a vote in Marlboro to go from 3 board members to 5.
Yes.
In the interim, we appointed Dan and Lauren, and they're now officially nominated or voted in board members, elected board members.
Congratulations.
And then Carol Ann Johnson was elected as well on town meeting day.
Great. And Caroline, is this your first time on the board?
Yes.
Caroline.
Carol,
Carol Ann.
Carol
If you remember
Ann.
both halves, it's
That's
not-
good.
not-
Carol Ann, that's good.
She's been going
Welcome.
to board meetings for like a year, haven't you?
Year and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Anybody else want to talk about what's happened since the last time we met? Yes.
So at our meeting, Townsend Town meeting, we used our non-binding business to discuss Act 46. And I just kind of gave an overview of where we're at. And again, the community is very supportive of what we want to do as a board. And then also as a follow-up, we had Emily, who took some Q&A and had some discussion regarding Act 46 among other things.
And how was that?
It's a wonderful experience. I love being in town. Seriously.
Great,
Yeah.
great, thanks.
So in Dover, we did a 3-question survey at town meeting, and I know I sent it to Stephen right afterwards, and it got circulated, which is kind of confirmed what people have been telling us all along. We also, last Monday or the Monday before?
Last Monday.
Last Monday, we've been requested by Reedsboro to meet with them, and our great minute taker took minutes of that meeting, and Reedsboro's a K-8, and they're not sure where they want to go, so the chair had called and asked if they, since Dover and Wardsboro have been kind of bouncing some ideas around, they asked if they could be part of that. And then Jamaica also came down, and Vernon came up. So we actually had schools from 3 supervisory unions, and Marlboro was there also. Yeah, Halifax was there, and I think that was it. But there was, I think Halifax was just there to see what's going on. Marlboro, there was some interest because there were some K-8s and some K-6s, and we just kind of got together. And if we told Reedsboro that if they wanted to look into being K-6 and working up with us or hooking up with other K-6s in Wyndham Central, that we didn't think anybody would block them or say no, but they would have to make that decision on their own. And I think Halifax is pretty much, they're happy with the way they're going, and there's nobody from Stamford, I don't believe, so.
So out of that meeting, and other than sort of leaving the door open for them to potentially join in as this group goes further down the road, anything more specific than that?
I didn't get any other feeling, maybe
Okay.
somebody else who was there would.
I would say, I thought Reedsboro left feeling rather enthusiastic about the thought of joining with Wardsboro and Dover and possibly Jamaica, and having the person who was there representing Reedsboro very much wants to have look into having choice for 7 and 8. So and beyond, they already offer choice for 9 through 12. So she seemed pretty enthusiastic to me, and
Okay,
I
so
think there'll be emotion there.
what I guess I would just suggest is that as we go forward over the next month, to just thinking at what point does it make sense to kind of invite them in, but,
So Laura just mentioned
Yeah.
that she thought they were coming tonight too.
oh, okay.
So I didn't take it that they were that enthusiastic. I thought she was just kind of looking for options for her town. She was feeling a little flustered, and there's,
Yeah, good stuff, okay, so, all right, we're gonna hold that Reedsboro situation out there, and if the time comes when it makes sense for them to be absolutely at the table, we just need to decide when to invite them, but, okay, anybody else want to report on what took place on town meeting, or since town meeting? Yes.
The Wyndham Board is very interested in this particular committee and this study, and is also unanimously interested in studying different models of potential reduction of supervisory unions. That's where we'd like to put our focus for now.
In general, or in this area?
In general, for the whole state.
one of the obvious questions that people have raised in the past was whether the two whether this Wyndham Central and Wyndham Southwest should be one. I mean, that's been raised by the state board on a number of occasions.
Well,
So you didn't have a specific proposal related to this
Not yet,
discussion?
no, but
Okay.
we're trying to look into it and maybe develop different potential models, like cutting down from 62 maybe to 10 or maybe to 3, and see what that would entail and how that would look.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, so let's then move on to the next thing. I did want to, Stephen, we didn't pass the financial report out, did we? So one more thing before we move into the criteria conversation in more specifically, the last time I circulated a financial sheet, Rich pointed out that he didn't think it was accurate, and as usually is the case, he was absolutely accurate. I think this is accurate, but we are always open to people to raise questions. All that this sheet is, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but I just wanted to make sure we got out the correct information. All that this is it comes off a template that's been created by the Superintendent School Boards and Vermont School Boards Insurance Trust, which is a tool that people can use to model different kinds of what-ifs. All that this does is say your current tax rate pre-CLA, that's the difference, Rich. The number you had on there in the past was not pre-CLA. So these are the pre-CLA numbers from 2016, in other words, the year that we're currently in. And all it does is compare what your tax rate was this year to what it would have been this year if you didn't have a small schools grant or the ADM hold harmless. So you can see that some people are not affected at all, some people are affected in fairly small ways, and there are some people that are affected, substantially. So if you, in Marlboro, for example, it's 8 cents on a $200,000 house, what's that, $160 or whatever on a tax rate. So that's on a tax bill. So that would be, this just gives you a sense of if nothing happens, and all that happens is the elimination of these two features, which Act 46 will call for, this would be the impact of that feature, of that change. It's just information. This instrument can also compare if you were to decide to seek the 4-year incentives by doing side-by-side arrangements or whatever. It can model what it's going to look like in fiscal '22 for all the different towns with all the moving parts. So we will do more of that as options start to emerge, so you can kind of see what those things look like. Any other questions about what this is? This is pretty simple, straightforward. But the last time we had wrong information, so this is, there should be a date at the, oh no, I guess I didn't bring the dated copy. Just, why don't you write, hey, did we make the change for pre-CLA? Yes, we did. Okay. Yeah, just stick this date on it, so it's March 14th. So moving on in the agenda to the criteria. If you go to does everybody have the criteria list that was circulated?
If you don't, raise your hand, I have copies here. Criteria list came out.
We should have colored paper or something so people can.
Electronically, but I brought a hard copy so you can write on
It
it.
says results of brainstorm.
Results of Brainstorm, it says, yeah.
Okay.
Everybody got it?
So at the last meeting, we spent about a half an hour, 45 minutes talking about, before we start getting into options, because everybody loves options, everybody loves, I mean, you may not love them, but people like to get into the structural conversation. But it's really important to be thinking about what might be accomplished by whatever you decide you want to do. So that once you start looking at specific options and you start, the hope would be that you'll end up with 3, 4, 5 specific approaches to this thing, so that we can then assess those 5 approaches based on a set of criteria. So we did this brainstorming, and what I did was organized all the individual items into several categories. There's nothing sacred about the categories. It was just my way of organizing them, so it wasn't a list of 40 items. So what I'm interested in is what else? This was the starting point from the last time. What else should be a consideration to assess any structural option against? And we got a few this morning. One has to do with that it would achieve reasonable cost per pupil, and of course that has to be defined, that it would be. Student-teacher ratio, we have the sort of the standard that Newbrook put out for us, but the general statement is we ought to be able to better manage student-teacher ratio. We ought to make sure that whatever we do, we achieve improvements and more equitable quality based on raising the bar for everybody, not by cannibalizing somebody who maybe is doing something well now. And we're able to attract more school board members by virtue of whatever happens. Those were added. So what else has been missing from this discussion for criteria? Howie?
Well, right now, in Vermont, we have a governance system that basically is one school board looking after each individual school. And it's given us one of the best school systems in the country. We're easily in the top 10 of our school system. So Act 46 is asking us to give up our one school board per school governance system in exchange for a large school board governing multiple schools. My question is, and I think a part of the criteria should be, that this needs to improve the governance of our school. Right now, our local school boards go, look after our schools with a magnifying glass. We need to be assured that if we're going to give up our local school boards, some joint school board is going to take care of our local schools and provide community participation equal or exceeding what we have right now for our schools.
So it's all a question of strong local oversight on a very level.
Yeah, I mean,
You don't want to lose the focus on.
I don't see the best private schools looking to merge their school boards and have some kind of joint governance.
All right, so one of the criteria that it has to preserve the notion of strong oversight over individual local schools.
Yes.
Okay? Other criteria to be added. A little redundant. Any other criteria to add to the list?
I thought we discussed it last time, but I think we should look to other states to see, is there any other state going through something similar, some kind of consolidation? If so, what have they done? And how did they do it? What results are they achieving? And not only other states, but other countries. Are there other countries that have good models for restructuring?
Okay, I'm just going to put this on the list of other ideas, because that's really not a criteria, it's something you think we should be doing, correct? Okay. Laura?
Can I just ask for clarification? And
Sure.
I might have missed this,
Absolutely.
speaking from the ceiling. The providing, I see here, providing bigger schools, more peers, and more learning opportunities for our children. Was that an unqualified regardless as to
Okay.
age and grade
Yeah.
level? Or
Let me
was-
just state, this is a brainstorm list. We have not done any weighting or we will be weighting these when we get them. I want to get them all out here.
Yep.
We will consolidate them. We will then determine which ones there's broad interest in. I believe the person that stated it, and if you're here, you can certainly speak for yourself, was stating they just wanted more opportunities for their kids. They used the word bigger than what their current school was. We had the discussion about big is, of course, a relative term, and none of I think anything you do would not be truly big, but Who mentioned this? You mentioned it? You want to explain it for yourself?
Just, basically at all levels, just seeing that the bigger schools that we visited seem to have a lot more, a variety of opportunities for kids and just more opportunities for friends and peer, all that.
You don't need to, I just wanted to clarify
That's
that
what
we
it was
meant it
about.
at all levels, elementary, middle.
Potentially.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else on criteria? What about, I'm going to ask you some questions because these are things that may not have occurred to you, but they'll be important when you start trying to weight different things. What about incentives? Do you care about incentives or do you not care about incentives? Should that be, is that a criteria, so when you're looking at several options that you might want to recommend to your communities, is achieving incentives important or is it not important? Different communities.
Yeah, define incentives.
What incentives are you talking about? Tax?
About the existing incentives?
There's, yes, the financial incentives, I went through this at the last meeting, but the financial incentives that have been offered are several. For this particular region, it would be the Act 153 incentives, the 4-year aid, 6, 4, and 2 cents off your tax rates. It would be receiving a $150,000 transition grant that would help pay for stuff that you'd have to do to come together and create a single district. You'd protect your small schools grant, they would become merger support grants, and you would be able to have the ADM hold harmless feature going forward. I believe those are the incentives that you get, that are possible to get if action is taken by July 1st, 2017. I'm really just asking the question, because there are some towns that say incentives are fleeting, they last for 4 years, they're gone. And there are other people that say we owe it to our taxpayers. It's really your judgment call. I'm asking the question because there are some options that you may choose where you'd get the full bunch. There may be some you get partial, and there may be some things that you do that would get no incentives. So,
Well, just from the history of our town and our voters, in this chart, it shows roughly a 4.4% increase. And I think if we present to the voters, we can go into this big district and have less of a say, or stay our own district, and it'll cost you an extra 4.4 cents. I would pretty sure the voters would vote to pay the extra 4.4 cents.
that is not the incentives. That is simply saying that
is the only incentives. Those are the two incentives. You just gave it to us.
That is only small schools grants and ADM hold harmless. That is not the 864.
Oh,
It's not the tax
But
incentives.
again, there's, that is a make-believe number. I don't want to go there again.
Yeah, I'm just asking a question. I don't want to leave the criteria list until you all think this through as to whether you want it or not. Go ahead, Laura.
So I would say, for me personally, the financial incentives are inconsequential here. I think the real benefit of Act 46 are the incentives to improve educational opportunity. Act 46 cannot and will not correct the statewide property tax dilemma that we have.
Mhm.
And so therefore, I don't think that should be highly weighted for
Okay,
us.
is that generally agreed to? Go ahead. Howard?
Yeah, I'll agree with that. In fact, we're making decisions that have long-term implications for our school systems way beyond a 3, 4, or 5-year incentive program that the state's dangling in front of us. We need to look at the long-term consequences for our towns and for our kids.
Okay. Emily?
So I agree with everything that was said, especially about the opportunities for kids, but I don't want to underestimate the potential need for those 4-year incentives, for the accelerated 5-year incentives. And that's why I hate calling them incentives, because they are something that can help stabilize tax rates for a period of time until collective work is done to potentially reduce. That's all.
Okay. Any other comment on this one before we move on? Yes. Yeah, go ahead.
I feel like it's important. Our taxpayers are very interested, and I don't think, the short term of the 864, could be one thing, but the small schools grant and the rest, I think, is a longer term benefit, and I think it's important.
So I want to make sure you got the full process that we're going to be going through. Then there's a couple other people who want to speak. This is not the only conversation about this. We will have this list of criteria. I'm then going to ask you all to weight the criteria. So there'll be some criteria that you're going to give. You're each going to have 100 points of value that you're going to need to apply to the possible criteria. So there's the last time we mainly talked about education quality. And so it seems like that's where the real energy is about education quality. I'm going to be raising several other questions that you might want to put on the list. When you weight them, you may find that incentives or financial benefits are going to get a much lower ranking than the educational benefits. But the question is, do you want it on the list anywhere is really the question. So there were a couple other.
Oh, they're speaking about it.
I'm sorry, yeah, go ahead, Ken.
Well, in my opinion, from what I've seen from the incentives, and we've gone over them when we did the red study and everything, the bottom line to the 8 cent, 6 cent, 4 cent, 2 cent is you look like you're saving money, but you're not saving money. Because once you do the consolidation, any consolidation that comes out of Act 46 is supposed to be taxpayer friendly. And yet, with the consolidation, it's supposed to save money. So if it's gonna save money, there shouldn't be an increase that you would have to offset it by 8 cents, 6 cents. So all it's doing is just raising your taxes a guaranteed 2 cents per year.
Yeah. You know, it's, the answer, I mean, the dilemma with this conversation is that if you bring 4 or 5 or 6 districts together in a single district, there will be some people who will see an immediate tax benefit, because their cost per pupil is going to go down, and there are other people who are going to see an increase because their cost per pupil is going to go up a little bit, because it ends up having leveling kind of effect. What the incentives do is buffers that for the districts that are going to go up, it buffers it. I mean, that's what it does. It brings because the people who are on the high end are going to come down anyway. They'll come down even a little more. There's 3 things that I'm just going to point out here. And again, this is informational, and then we're going to just keep moving on to see if you want to put it here. But there's 3 things that you need for data. With people that I've been working with. One is there's the impact of sort of doing something that brings incentives. Then there's the issue of what would those comparable tax rates be with taking no action? No action. And the third option is if the state was to reorganize you. The question would be to try to anticipate what that might look like. Nobody knows what that might look like, but at the moment, that's what the law says, they will do something like that. So what you need to understand is the financial impact of all 3 of those, because the choice may not just be incentives versus no action. It may be incentives versus the state reorganization. So if the state reorganized your district into something else, you'd end up having the level, if your costs are already low, you may find your costs going up and you won't have any of the modifiers.
Well, that's where Newfane and Brookline will be. And the problem,
Right.
and since you opened the door.
Just information.
I'm glad you did and I didn't.
It's just information, but go ahead, yeah.
With that, there's no doubt in my mind that Newfane and Brookline taxes are going to go up substantially. There's no doubt in my mind. And that's if you have, and for an example, we'll say out of this whole committee comes a side-by-side with choice high schools and non-choice high schools. And that's gonna be the side-by-side, K-12, and, that's what let's just say that's the formula that comes out of it. The bottom line is that once we consolidate into any formula in that realm, we're gonna come up with Newfane's taxes are automatically gonna go up, Brookline's taxes are automatically gonna go up, Jamaica's taxes are gonna come down, Townsend's taxes are gonna come down, Wyndham's taxes are gonna come down. There's no doubt in my mind that if that scenario comes out, that's what's gonna happen. Now, the only way to stop that is Act 46 says that we have to find a better governance structure. It doesn't say anything about an accounting structure. So, what I'm proposing, and I've been silent about this for a while, is I would be fine with that scenario if every school had its own budget based on its own needs. In other words, if Newfane's cost per pupil is 14,000 per pupil, and Jamaica's is 15,000 per pupil, it stays that way until some other consolidation makes, but the local budget should stay the local budget.
All right, so you're taking this, and I understand why you were sort of holding back, but you're taking it to a level that's really the next level of analysis. Were you on the Red Committee that did this?
Yes, I was.
And did they produce data that basically told that story that you just ran out, in terms of what happened to people's tax rates?
The numbers that we had weren't, in my opinion, the best numbers.
Okay.
And
Wait, what I'm going to suggest is, in terms of the money, and it may come back to the other issue you raised before, is that we could try to do some rough modeling. You may well be right, and logic may tell you that they're right, but you also have to remember that depending on how you decide to manage things like your indebtedness, that may or may not be the case, because other people will be, I mean, the new entity might be spreading that further. So I would suggest we hold that. But I haven't forgotten it. I'm sure you won't let me forget it either. All right, so we got two more here. Go ahead.
My comment just though is that I don't think the financial thing is the top reason for doing this, and
Right.
that's the only point I was trying to make is your numbers probably won't change all that much. So if we go to the voters and just say we want to do this for finance, so that's why I think what Laura was saying and everybody else has been saying, don't look at this as a numbers thing, look at it as a chance for opportunity to do better for our kids. So what we need to be able to take back to our voters is why this is going to be better for our students.
Absolutely.
And I think that's why I think the financial thing needs to get bumped down. And I know we're not prioritizing them, but
Yeah, we're not prioritizing, and I do want to respect the fact we started this off as a brainstorm, and we're going to finish it as a brainstorm. So there were a couple of people who said they thought we should at least acknowledge it. It may, when you prioritize it, it may end up at the very bottom, but there's at least some interest in that. Yes, you want to
I
add
had
another
one
one?
criteria, I just wanted to, from the three bullets, I just need a point of clarification on the three bullets you made. So I understand the first two, but the reorganized part, if this Act 46 doesn't, force you to change in any way, when does the state come in? Can you give me an example of a reorganization and when that might happen?
No, I can't give you an example, but I can give you the timetable. I mean, what it says is that if you vote by July 1st, 2017 to do something in certain categories, then you in essence are protected from the state taking any action. If you don't do that, you can submit an alternative proposal to the secretary by November of 2017. So it's only a year and a half from now. Then by June 1st of 2018, she submits a proposal to the state board for how the state ought to finish whatever it started. And then the state board holds hearings and will actually, there'll be a whole structure to it. I'm sure there'll probably be a bunch of lawyers and a bunch of other people as well. But they will go through a structured process from June 1st to November 30th. And the state board will issue its final order on November 30th for what will happen on July 1st, 2019. So it is important, I mentioned this at the last meeting, you don't want to be obsessed with it. I think you had the right conversation the last time. I mean, this should be about what can you do to really improve education in this region for all students. But you should have in the back of your head the what ifs, simply because it's part of the reality that exists right now under the law. So, all I was saying, so you were saying, like, what might they do? You know, and it's hard to, I wouldn't even guess in this area, but in some other areas, I mean, let's take Chittenden South, which is CVU and has 4 towns, and they all feed into the same junior, senior high school. I would be very surprised if the state board didn't require them to become a pre-K to 12 district 2 years from now, if they don't do it themselves. I mean, I think that's a high likelihood. And so if they were to choose to take no action, and then the state requires them to do it, then they end up at the same place with none of the incentives and the buffers and the supports. It's just part of the current reality of the bill. It could change in the meantime. There may be all kinds of other considerations. Just something to think about. But it's not as, you know, the future picture is not as clear here, obviously. Howie?
The website here says, if a district decides to not voluntarily merge, there's only 3 tasks that need to be completed: an evaluation, meeting with other districts, and submit a proposal to maintain its current structure. I mean, it's not such an onerous disaster if your town votes to keep its school board. It's a very much on the table option. And everything here we are discussing is an option, including just keeping things the way they are.
That is what the law says, and it puts the decision about what happens in their hands. So the rest of the story, you're exactly right. That's what you would have to do. But then it's in the hands of the secretary and especially the state board.
Well, the state is us. We are the state.
Well, the state board is a legal body that has a certain authority. Okay. Any other criteria? Let's go back to anything else about criteria? Anything else about, let's see, are there specific criteria related to decisions? What about choice? We skirted it the last time. There are several items in the criteria. What might a criterion look like for this entire group relative to the choice question? If just in case you're all bored with the conversation.
Are you talking just high school or high school?
I'm just saying, I mean, you're gonna be asked to sort of look at a set of options, and you're gonna have to stack them up against what you said was important. I'm asking you now what's important about choice.
I think I'd like to add it to the criteria, only because we have not yet, and I plan to do this with our principal, but look at you know, people moving to the region in our town specifically for choice, and sort of weigh that and sort of add that in the criteria. Maybe reach out to those people specifically and find out if they moved to the area because of choice or not.
What would you, again, keeping in mind our collective task, how would you state the choice question? Or a criterion that might apply to the work of this joint committee?
How will choice impact communities at large? Or the loss of choice, maybe? Yeah, it would be stated as an affirmative criteria, so that you're looking at an option A.
School choice is preserved.
School choice is preserved as it currently exists?
Maybe
Well,
we could twist that a little bit
no.
more. Expand it.
Well, I'm asking you for the statement, so but you're right, it's stated, I mean, that was a clear statement.
School choice decisions do not impact community, I guess, at large. I don't know if that's the way to say it, but whether it goes one way or the other, it doesn't impact, you know, the town. People don't flee the town and move to where they, you know, or vice versa. I don't know.
I think we're looking at two different ways, preserved or expanded.
Yeah, because for instance, in Jamaica, we've had a couple realtors come and speak about how it would draw people to our town if we had choice, so I'm not sure we would wanna.
Okay, keep in mind, this is a brainstorm list, but they need to be, if you're gonna put it on the brainstorm list, we're gonna be weighting these, so there may be lots of different opinions about these. So if somebody else has a different statement, you can put that up too, and we will be rating them at some point in
It
time.
says preserved or expanded. That's what
Preserved.
I just heard.
Don't worry, he was gonna call on me and then you just.
Oh, I thought he was pointing at me.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
School, well, I think one of the things is that this all has to be brought back, the individual communities, whatever we decide here is gonna be voted on.
Absolutely.
So school choice will be decided by the individual communities. We have to be able to.
Okay, All right, so let's just think about that. I'm gonna write that down. School choice. So whatever the options are that you're looking at is decided by individual communities, which is a statement of fact.
Oh, okay, well, but
Um,
where I was going with that was
Yep.
if we like, just as an example, if we have 98% of our voters want school choice for the high school, and we present a program that doesn't have it, we're probably not gonna get the rest of the program. Because it's an all or nothing vote, it's not a, well, okay.
Right, there'll be a
Right.
proposal that would come forward.
So
Yeah.
that's why I think it's important that it has to be from the input of the communities.
Okay, anybody want to make any other statement relative to this, keeping in mind the diversity of the counties, the towns that are in this region? Go ahead.
With regard to the choice issue, I would like to say, I personally feel strongly about that because that's what our communities have said. Or at least our community.
That's right,
It's the communities I represent.
Yeah.
Well, that's what they
We
have
are
said.
brainstorming, so anything else that you want to say about that? Yes?
Yeah, I would say it's really important that any kind of school closings would have to be decided by the town, by town vote only, and not by some joint board, when one district might just have one representative on that board.
If you decide to go down any road that involves unification, these are the things that you get into when, those of you that did the red before, this is the stuff you get into, where you actually, if you're gonna put forward something to your towns, you have to wrestle with that issue. So we probably won't go into the details of it, but you're saying that that's an important principle that needs to be possible, which it is. Oh, go ahead.
I'd like to add to that, not only that, the town's got a say in whether their schools are closed, but what grades are served by the local school, because I know it's easy for a board to say, okay, we're gonna change your school into a K-1 school. And technically, it's still open, but basically, your town school becomes a daycare center. And this is a pretty significant change for a town.
When you get into the details on this stuff, there are some things that where you can do this, actually have the town have the authority to vote. There are other things where you can't, and I'm not prepared to get into that discussion tonight, but there are the business about which grades are going to be provided in a particular school building starts to get into the authority of a new municipality. So the closure thing, there are some strategies for avoiding closure, but the question of getting into which grades and, which teachers and which kids and all that, the school board, whether it's a little bit bigger school board or your own town school board, has certain authorities that are listed in statute that you can't just undo. Yeah, go ahead.
Since this is on video, Howie, respectfully, I just want to make sure that we're not assuming or claiming that a K-1 is a daycare. We do have educational programs, pre-K through 12, and I think the validity of your point is that you don't want part of the school to be closed and limited to grade levels. Is that proper clarification? Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, anything else on the criteria question? Tonight's discussion obviously has been down a particular track. The big discussion we had about quality was at the last meeting. If I don't see anything additional, I'm going to rework the list of criteria, adding in the dimensions that we talked about tonight. I'll put them in a format where people can actually score them at the next meeting so that we can begin to consolidate your collective thinking about what's important. And this is a challenging one because it's a very diverse group of circumstances. And I think what you've all said tonight, which is what you said the last time, is that if you can keep the focus on students, it'll be more likely to bring you to common thinking about these issues. But it's not easy. I want to go back to the Leland and Gray question briefly before we move into a brainstorm of specific options. Jamaica has indicated that it's exploring with its community several options, one of which is maintaining the current connection with Leland and Gray. The other three are various other versions. Given the fact that there are five towns in Leland and Gray, ultimately what gets decided here is obviously the decision of one town has a substantial impact on others in terms of what options are available to you. And I don't know to what degree you have talked to each other about those issues. I mean, have you, I know you were all together in a red study at one point. I know you all serve on the Leland and Gray board together. But is there a current structure where you can have this conversation? Because as you all know, when you all signed on to Leland and Gray, you created a new entity, a new legal entity, and there's a statutory way of no longer being part of that entity that involves a bunch of steps, which ultimately includes the approval of every town that originally signed that agreement. So there's nothing that sort of we do here or that anybody else does that's going to change that reality. My question is, to what degree are you all talking together about that issue so that as you start thinking about possible pathways forward, the thinking can gel on that issue together? So let me just ask the question. Is there any structured way that conversation's taking place right now?
No.
Or is it really town by town?
No, not taking the question.
Okay. I don't know if, maybe I won't try to solve it right now, but maybe it's one of those things that we should talk about. You have a board meeting, you have an SU board meeting in a couple weeks?
The 23rd, yeah.
Next week. It may be one of those things that you all should think about, but I happen to think that it would be a worthwhile conversation to have together in the interest of, if it's going to be difficult to go for you. You guys have a date of May 17th, is that correct?
Yes.
And this group hopefully will be done about May 15th. And if they end up in totally divergent or inconclusive paths, it's going to be tough to kind of bring it to conclusion. I haven't thought it through at all, but if anybody's got any great ideas, please let us know, let Rich know, let Stephen know, let me know, and we can work it through. Do you have a great idea, Laura?
I will say that in the town of Dover, representing the town of Wardsboro, this decision does not impact me, and therefore I feel like probably I need to stay out of it. However, I would like to note that I did introduce legislation that would temporarily allow towns to go up instead of out regarding this question.
Say that again.
To go up
where?
to the State Board of Education and ask this question instead of out to the communities during this Act 46 process.
Oh, I see. You'd ask the state board to give the approval as opposed to
Yes.
what the current statute says.
Yep, and I would like to just explain why. I don't need to
Okay.
debate it. To date, it hasn't been picked up. I would just like to state that the reason that I did that, every single one of our communities has been asked, whether we want to or not, to look around and see what opportunities there are to improve education for our children. And so, in this situation, I am concerned that there are towns that are not afforded that same opportunity. I would also like to state unequivocally that I believe we need to absolutely maintain Leland and Gray High School, as well as Twin Valley High School in Windham County. I think they are critical educational institutions. And so I think that's all I have to say
Okay.
on the issue. Thank you.
All right, well, give it some thought. We don't need to solve it tonight, but if anybody's got great ideas on how to sort of work that through, I mean, it doesn't have to get worked through, but it'll be an incomplete product in May 15th if there isn't some way of coming together around some of those issues, so.
So actually, Emily and I had a discussion about this quite a while ago. And, you know, what role does Leland and Gray play? Because they're not a town, so they're not an entity, so the study goes out to the towns. So they're kind of like stuck in the middle. And, you know, when you were just saying, when you have that discussion, and I don't think it's a WCSU discussion because it's more for those towns that are part of it, but it's not a Leland and Gray discussion because they have no, they're not an entity other than just to oversee the school that's formed by those towns. So I think we
We are a
really.
school district, but we don't have the,
Right.
a voice in that.
So
Yes.
I think, you know, what we need is, and what maybe the Leland and Gray towns need is somebody to make a suggestion on how you deal with that. And I think that's gotta come from somebody that's smarter than me.
Let me, I think rather than consuming the time, because I do want to get on to the next big part of the conversation, I'm going to suggest that maybe I talk further with Stephen and, who's the chair of the Leland Gray Board?
I am
Joe. Maybe I talk to those guys about how best to have the conversation, because it may be that there's not a way to have it, but it would be helpful to have it before we get into trying to define specific options. It's complicated. Yes?
I just out of curiosity, how many students on average does Jamaica send to Leland and Gray?
47 Jamaica students.
47?
Okay. Oh, wait, last comment.
Absent some state action, I could pretty safely say that the chances of the 5 towns of Leland and Gray voting to allow one of the towns to withdraw from the union is 0, because it would significantly reduce the viability of our schools. So we couldn't responsibly vote along with something like that. So I can say that this is a conversation that has to happen on the state level. If the state chooses to release towns from their obligations to their student unions, that's a step the state's going to have to take. But we're going to have a discussion about that, I can tell you how that's going to go. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. Thank you, Howie. You can always rely on Howie to tell it like it is, because it's important that perspective be on the table. So.
But I think it's important that we do all actually have that conversation, because we have towns here that, we're in an interesting situation in Jamaica. And we have towns that don't want to consolidate at a level, and then towns that don't want us out at a level. So it's a conversation we need to have, because we're
Right.
a little stuck.
So you can, I think we've framed the issue reasonably well. The question is what might be done about it over the course of the next month. And I just think we need a way to have the conversation, but because it only affects, I say only, it affects a portion of those of you in the room, and then we've got the large conversation to have. I think we should just move on to the more global view, recognizing that it's all intertwined, and we'll run into it very quickly here. So what I want to do for the next half hour is to start talking about what some of the options are. And keep in mind the kind of criteria, especially that you talked about the last time, the stuff that's on the list there about the quality of education. But the purpose of this part of the conversation is to identify every possible option that's out there, whether you believe in it, whether you think it's a good idea, whether it's politically feasible or not. It's just helpful to get them all out there. We will then consolidate and winnow them down. But it's my experience has been that there are some that you may, like, without thinking it through very thoroughly, say, well, that would never work, or can't do that. But when you start to actually approach it this way, there are more possibilities than you may think. So what I'd like to do is take this next half hour to identify, as you understand the different options under Act 46, what could happen in this region? And again, you don't have to believe it. We're just trying to get them all up here. So there should be no, so go ahead.
So I'm speaking from, I'm a Brookline director and I work with the Newbrook Joint Board. And as Ken said, we believe we have already consolidated. We have closed the Brookline school. We have consolidated into the Newbrook school, and we have a joint contract school. So we think we did our job already.
All right, so when you think about the whole SU,
So it means
what would the
do nothing.
proposal be?
Yeah, do
You're
nothing.
suggesting do nothing, so.
I'm just saying that.
In other words, the option would be to basically take the option that Howie read, which basically said, describe how, under the current, within your current structure, you can meet the goals of Act 46. So one option is no change, and that is an allowed and legitimate option that's there. You're gonna have to weigh all these, but, okay, yes.
Marlboro has definitely considered the possibility of forming, and I'm not sure if it would be side-by-sides or whatever, with some towns which are within the Southeast Supervisory Union District. So ongoing conversations with some of those as to whether, let me just leave it at that, consolidating outside of this district.
Okay, so again, for this purpose, we're gonna list them all up here. There'll probably be several that might fit into that category, but that's helpful, yes.
I was just thinking about Leland and Gray and thinking about where you are geographically. Sometimes it's just lines on a map because that's where the line is on the map between counties. I mean, kids from Athens, Saxons River, wouldn't that be, why not, if you became.
You're proposing to expand the territory of Leland and Gray?
The territory for Leland and Gray, so that if a school like Jamaica, a community like Jamaica wants out of its contract with Leland and Gray. Just a thought.
Yes?
Well, it's sort of something I've been thinking about for a while, which is, this would be coming from the state, that there would be, at the high school level, school choice for everyone within the public high school system. So that any high school student could choose a school that fits them within reason, within driving distance from their home. I understand that might add some questions about transportation, but putting transportation aside, high school.
You're talking about statewide, or you're talking about region-wide?
I'm talking statewide, because I think that high schools should play to their strengths, and then they would attract the students that are attracted to that school's strengths. And it would, and that money should be coming from the state to help high schools develop their strengths.
Okay.
I mean, that's not happening with Act 46, I understand that, but that's a grander vision.
These are all excellent. I mean, what's practical, what isn't practical, what's legal, what isn't, there's all kinds of stuff going on, but this is the level of the conversation at the moment, so let's keep going. What other options have you imagined as you think about this region? Yes?
Actually, I'm gonna say the one people don't think I'm gonna say. The simplest, we all thought was the simplest option was that the Leland and Gray towns would be one district, and that, especially if Marlboro was thinking about not staying in this supervisory union, because you're the one with the pre-K-8 situation, but that that Dover and Wardsboro would become one, and that Stratton, I guess, goes with Winhall, so that you end up with a side by side, I guess. No, actually, Stratton would be gone, because they would join a different SU.
So Stratton would leave, Marlboro would leave the SU, possibly. Well, you're just laying it out here. So.
Yeah, so that possibility that we have two
Okay.
side by sides, I guess.
And that's pre-K to 6 or 8? 6 with high school choice?
Right.
And you have total choice. This isn't designation, it's total choice. Okay. So this is one option, okay?
Well, if we're right on that page, the other thing too is that Dover and Wardsboro and Marlboro could do something together and either become a K-8 or a K, and Marlboro could change to a K-6, or we could change to a K-8, what? No, but that's still a possibility.
Yes.
So, and Marlboro's K-8.
K-8.
So you'd have to align with those.
Right, well, that's what we said,
Yeah.
is either Marlboro would have to change or Dover, Wardsboro would have to change.
Okay, I'm gonna put it in here. I'll probably put it in as a distinct option in the list that we work with the next time, but.
Stratton could also choose to have another choice, we could have a side by side, right?
Say more
They'd
about
have to
that.
partner with somebody. They're probably out of the district right now.
I'm sorry, say that again?
They could partner with somebody that's out of the district right now. And
They
have
could.
it Side by side by side.
They could. So if they wanted to join this supervisory union, that's correct. They could. So they'll either be leaving to go to some other supervisory union, or they could bring somebody with them, or bring partner. And again, just so it's clear to people, when the advantage for them to do that is that, from the financial point of view, is that they would qualify for the incentives if they were to do that. Yes.
Just a point of clarification, but if you were to bring a partner in, I mean, for Marlboro, it'd be very difficult, I would assume, from a supervisory district to be coming into this. They would have to be voted out, right? I mean.
Not necessarily. What do you have in mind?
Like, I don't know, let's say Putney or Dummerston
Yeah.
or Vernon or any of those people don't like the accelerated model that they're going through or that they were about to go through, and they say, we'd like to move into this SU.
Yes.
How would that go about? I mean, would they have to be voted out of their
Yes.
SD?
If they're part of Brattleboro Union High School, they would have to get excused, the same as the Leland Gray conversation. They'd have to get excused from Brattleboro Union High School. Whether they can change SUs, whether the elementary, whether you can do something across lines, elementary and high school, there's a bunch of probably legal questions in there. But yes, they would have to get excused from Brattleboro Union High School in order to join you guys as a pre-K to 8.
So, I mean, that's very, like, 1 percentile, I think, in that, I know we're talking outside the box, but I just feel like we need to probably keep things in perspective.
But I think you're talking about two separate
Yeah, you
things,
are.
because a union high school is a much more, I think, difficult thing to be voted out of than a supervisory union.
There should be no barrier to
vote out.
supervisory.
Right, so-
But supervisory district is what they are, they're an SD.
No.
No.
So if they brought in another pre-K-12 full choice district, they would just be joining our SU.
That's correct.
That's
If
right.
you were to bring in, I mean, Halifax
For
is a
example,
choice town,
Halifax or
right?
Reedsboro.
Halifax is choice. Is it pre-K to 8 or are they 6?
K to 8.
Yeah,
They pre-K to 8?
High school.
So you could
Choice.
bring in Halifax,
Right.
and they could simply, with the plan could include, we want to join together with Marlboro and we want to switch into this SU, or vice versa. You guys may say you want to join some other SU. But if you're part of the Brattleboro Union High School, that's where the yoke is.
I think it's important, and I think everybody already knows this, because I know we've talked about it before, but it's important to remember that if some supervisory union formed like this you're drawing up there, one side does need to be a pre-K-12 or K-12.
That's correct.
And I think sometimes that's lost when we start talking about.
It's good to remember that at least one of the districts in this new entity would have to be pre-K to 12. They couldn't all be something else. That's great. Thank you for reminding us of that.
I don't understand, aren't they basically all pre-K-12, they just have?
Operating,
different-
pre-K to 12,
Oh,
operating. You're right. They are all pre-K to, not these guys, but, they're all pre-K to 12. But they have to be, one of them has to be operating pre-K to 12. Yeah. Okay, other options, go ahead.
An observation or comment, maybe, if they wanted, if the legislature want us to look in the big picture, just with these conversations we're having, why wouldn't they have made it easier for people to work through the union district stuff easier? Because that seems to take a lot of options off the table for people too.
Why wouldn't they make it easier to get out of a union, or?
Why would they have addressed more of the union, the high school, the union? Is there not that many of them, or we just?
36 of them, I think.
So it wasn't a big, okay.
Well, no, it's a big, I mean.
Well, it seems
big
like
deal.
that's, a lot of things people are thinking about, that seems to be the drawback, is they're locked into this union high school thing, but yet, they're wanting us to look and go, big picture and look at the 100-mile view, and it just seems like that's preventing some of that 100-mile view.
Yeah.
But then I guess it would also ruin, I don't know, it would make it too confusing maybe.
You can look at it both ways. I mean, again, it's more complicated here than most places. I don't know how many, there's relatively few districts that have a union high school district in the midst of a lot of other things. More predominantly, if you have a union high school, it's the whole works. So in many respects, the legislators that I heard just debating it saw that as sort of half the unification has already occurred. But in a place like this, where you have this mix, this mix of all kinds of options, it's not, none of it's clean. Other options, and again, thinking of the other, and again, extreme stuff that you may not have seen on here. Go ahead.
So, I mean, the secretary laid an option that probably the best option here would be for a unified K-12, pre-K-12.
For everybody.
Everybody.
And everything that entails, which would be operate the same grades and have the same high school
Well,
options.
we're not talking about favorable, we're talking
So-
about possible.
This is possible. It goes everywhere from 1 district to 10 district. The doing nothing option is remaining at 10 districts. The most extreme option here is to do 1 district, but then everybody has to agree on choice, operating, high school options, all the rest of it. Okay. But it is possible. I mean, it is possible. Other options?
I mean, is this where you want us to talk about some of the other options we've been looking at? How
Sure.
would it impact the group? I don't know if this is.
Yeah, go ahead and try us, and we'll see what we'll go.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So one option would be staying within this SU, and so if we left the Leland and Gray Union but stayed in this SU and joined with Dover, Wardsboro, perhaps Reedsboro. And so I guess the Leland and Gray district would be 4 towns instead of 5, and then we would be part of this larger district that offered choice at whatever level it will end up being.
So that is,
Yeah,
okay, so
right.
that was that option. Yep.
And then the other 2 options, we would actually leave the SU as well as the Leland and Gray district. One, we would join into what's becoming a gigantic district with Floodbrook and
Okay.
right in there, the BRSU, and join in the district that includes Manchester and Dorset and Londonderry, Peru, Weston, etc.
Is the Mountain Towns red or? Okay,
Yeah, that's
okay.
part of it, those
All right.
towns.
And the Bennington Rutland SU, okay.
Right.
Was that a second one, or were there 2 in there? So this is
No, that's the
one,
second one.
and what's the third one?
The third one is that we would become a pre-K-12 choice, so we would join Winhall. And we're assuming that would mean leaving this SU because they're pretty well already set, I think, to join with Stratton and leave this SU. So we're assuming at this point that would, if we joined with Winhall and had a pre-K-12 choice situation, we would be leaving that SU.
Okay, all right. So, these are distinct options. They're Jamaica focused. And again, for purposes of our exercise, I'm gonna have to figure out before the next meeting how to organize these so that people can weigh in on them in a way that makes sense in light of the circumstances, but it's very helpful to have them up here. Other specific options, and again, the level it would be nice to be at, although I do want, if there's specifics like that, it's good to get them up here. But when you think about what else could be done, are there any other big ideas that you've talked about that would be comprehensive, that would cover all of these folks and maybe even spill over into your neighbors? Go ahead.
So the 2 SUs or 3 SUs?
2 SUs or 3, the third being
SCSU.
SESU.
I
South,
think
is
it's
it not called Wyndham?
Wyndham Southeast she's talking
Yeah.
about.
Yep.
Wyndham Southeast.
We're all Wyndham, so we really want to.
So it's basically the big, so 2 or 3 SUs becoming 1 district, becoming 1 SU with some, and then maybe a reconfiguration of a variety of
I
things.
have no idea, it's monstrous, to think about
Okay.
doing that in a year is crazy, but.
Single SU, well, I do urge you, now's the time to be thinking, even if you don't spend huge amounts of time on it, now's a good time to at least give it enough thought to decide whether it's anything you want to pursue. You could conceivably make a recommendation, if you could convince your neighbors, to create a single SU with several significant different configurations within it. You could do that, and it could now could be the time to do it if you wanted to do a comprehensive plan. But you'd have to convince the rest of your neighbors to join.
Seems impractical given the time that
And
is
the fact
left.
and the fact that Bradford is still on the path anyway.
But let's keep it on there because maybe in the meantime, while you're driving home tonight or whatever, something will strike you that
Did you have 2 or 3 SUs down there?
I've got 2 SUs
Yeah.
or 3 SUs that would combine into a single SU with an overall plan with several different options and districts and choice and et cetera. Okay.
I just want
Yeah.
to address that merging SU's possibility, and that's the only real possibility that involves cost savings. SUs are really expensive to run. I would imagine that the average SU runs a $4 or $5 million budget. So if we can merge 3 SUs into one, there will be a lot more cost savings than merging any particular unpaid school board with another one.
So there's the proposal. That's a whole discussion. There's no question that there are savings. It's not as much as you think, but because a lot of that special ed and transportation, et cetera. But there are savings.
Financial officers, bookkeepers, audits.
3 of those have happened in the last year, and they all had savings that were measurable. Not huge, but measurable. Yes?
Does it make sense to add Reedsboro into the mix
Sure.
that was on the other page?
Yes.
Saying Reedsboro, K6 with Dover, Wardsboro, maybe Marlboro, maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah, I don't.
So that would be Dover, Wardsboro, and
Just saying that could be a side, like if we did, like one side was the Leland and Gray district schools, the
Yes.
other side could be a K6.
what we'll do is, when we're organizing these into some more choices, one of the choices will probably be to create some kind of a K-6 or K-8 district, maybe one of each, whatever. And then people have to decide whether they want to be, it makes sense to have one of those. And then the task is starting to invite people to the conversation. Do they think they might want to join into the discussion?
So my question always comes back to different communities, schools, philosophy.
Yes.
So we're talking about, where are the K6s, where are the K8s, right? How much do we spend per pupil, which maybe aligns somewhat with philosophy, but not necessarily.
Yes.
Might have to do with geography. I know for Reedsboro, for instance, that's an issue for them, is just where they're located. It's hard for them to attract good people.
And they've also been committed
How
forever
much-
to spending the least amount that does not
Well, their
require
board
them to pay
doesn't seem
anything
to
into
be
the state
feeling
fund.
that way anymore.
Okay,
For whatever
that's
reason,
good.
but I just wonder how much attention we really ought to be putting into that. I'm trying to get an idea about, let's say all of this magic happens and we figure this all out. How much does it impact the day-to-day running of the different schools? How much do these schools have to change their philosophies to align with each other? That's the big question mark for me.
Are you making a statement about that? You'd
I'm
like
just
them to?
asking, when we're talking about all these schools that we're
Yeah.
gonna bring in, I think, well, yeah, Halifax is a K-8, we're a K-8, but I'm not sure that necessarily we would have much else in common with each other.
That's obviously the challenge of this whole thing. You could put down here, as one of your criteria, you want schools to be able to preserve their cultural identity, their strengths, whatever. I mean, you could put that in as a criteria if you want to.
That also attaches to a dollar amount, and does that mean that Marlboro and Halifax would have to have identical budgets? Does Brookline and Newfane have identical? It looks like not from this thing that's sent down. I mean, this is what confuses me when we go through all this.
The quick answer to your question, I don't want to get dragged into it in too much detail, but the quick answer is, if you have a new district, it has a board who would look an awful lot like you all, that is now responsible for a slightly larger area, a few more schools, a larger budget, and has to think about the maintenance of all the buildings, the quality of what's going on in all the districts, making sure that kids over here don't get this and kids over here get this, and how you're gonna raise all bars, how you can do it as cheaply as you can do it, and still get the quality. And they have to figure all that out, and they will do that within the parameters that get set up by whatever articles get written when you're creating the new district. So there can be parameters put on it, but for the most part, just think a school board with a broader group of kids that they're responsible for, and they're responsible for all the kids.
Can
Yeah,
I
go
just
ahead.
add, so if you watch Wyndham Southeast, very carefully, their articles of agreement and an accelerated path are trying to address that issue by having building-based or some site-based committees still having some influence on maintaining the traditions. Now, whether that's satisfactory will be interesting to observe, whether the people in those towns vote for that or not. But that is a specific example of, a study committee trying to deal with that issue. And we're not at that point here because we haven't decided to study anything together, really, except in this exploratory way. But that is the way it has been addressed in many, many much larger districts than this, because frankly, across the nation, there are lots of bigger districts that run lots of schools, and none of those schools look like vanilla.
So it seems to me that that would make all of us a lot less anxious if we knew we could maintain a lot of our schools.
That should be a criteria then, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I just added as a criteria because I do think it's an important, you asked it as a question, but I think it's an important criteria. Okay, and other structural options that ought to be on the table that you could envision?
Can I
Yep.
just ask you a question? What you just said about the consolidation of these boards, and there were models out there with districts that had never really before had any dealings with each other. I find a real disconnect there with the actual goal of improving student opportunity. I cannot understand how 10 or 12 districts that have never really cooperated before, some of them smaller, some of them larger, get together in a new board. Some have 2 representatives, some may have 3, some may just have 1. And yet, this is all geared toward improving student opportunity, where some of these districts don't even really have any kind of connection to all these other school districts. And so for me, there's a real disconnect between the actual goal, the light at the end of the tunnel, and this whole structural change.
So I'm assuming when it comes time to actually weighing what's important, you're going to weigh local voice very heavily, more so than more so than bigness, for example. And you probably wouldn't choose a model that would have 10 districts running all the schools in the whole area. I mean, all we're doing here is trying to sort out what the possible options are, what's important, and you've stated very well what you believe is important. So we're just trying to come up with possible options. So, but your point is well taken, and there's a number of people that obviously agree with you. Other structural options that you've thought about up to now, that you've had conversations with your town, things you've thought about that have occurred to you?
I have a question. If a school has a lot of space left over because, just take for fun, this building, we have 47 less students in it, just as an idea. So now you've got potentially some space in the building not being used. Can Leland and Gray, or another school where it might happen, rent out that space to, let's say, someone who specializes in doing some type of remedial work or special art therapy, or let's say the Kindle school could rent this space, I don't know.
The answer is there are a variety of things that are possible, but obviously that would be a decision of a future school board, and so it's not, I don't think it's central to this part of the conversation, but yes, the answer is when school districts have space, just like you all now do, somebody closes a school, there's buildings all over this state that used to be school buildings that people are now using for other purposes. Yes?
Speaking as one of those districts that have closed a school.
Yes.
No principal and no board member wants to be a landlord. It is more headache than it is to even, even if your goal is to
Right.
break even.
That's what I said,
So
this
you
is way
don't-
down the.
You don't want to go that way.
Good point.
You're just adding more trouble.
Okay, Howie, we're going to just take a couple more and then we have to move to the next thing.
One of the things that mystified me about Act 46 from the beginning was this goal of sharing resources, because in the town of Wyndham, we've always shared resources. We've always had traveling teachers to fill in for an art teacher, for a music teacher on a half-day or 1 day a week per basis, and we've been doing that very effectively. And this, of course, is touted as one of the, big advantages of consolidating school boards, but we've been doing it without consolidation. So in light of the fact that we have been doing that, and one of the options is not changing things and keeping our existing school boards, I would like to see out of this committee maybe coming a enhanced way of sharing resources throughout the supervisory union or the state. And right now, we're sharing teachers is pretty much limited to within the supervisory union. But if the state were to step up to the plate, we could have traveling art teachers that move across supervisory unions. And we could really enhance the education of our kids in small schools.
All right, I'm going to add that as one of the criteria to create enhanced sharing of resources. Any last structural proposal before we move on?
Is a modified union school district in there?
No.
There is not. And what would that require? That requires a few side-by-sides, is it 2?
No.
2 or 3?
Different. The Leland and Gray, which is often referred to as red, ended up being a modified unified union school district as opposed to a red.
In
We
terms
made
of
it-
proposal.
Yeah, it changed from a red to an MEUSD.
So the short version of it is that if towns are yoked, for lack of a better term, through a union high school specifically. So the 5 towns that are in Leland and Gray Union High School are legally bound together, and they can only get out through the vehicle that we talked about. If under this law, or under, actually it's Act 153, but if through this process they decide to become a pre-K to 12 district instead of a instead of a just a union high school, it is possible for one town or 2 towns, depending on which ones they are and what the committee agrees on, to go ahead and create a single district that includes all of high school and a bunch of elementary schools, and still leave intact 1 or 2 elementary schools, school boards, school districts. So you end up with one big school, which is called a modified unified union high school, which covers pre-K to 12 for 3 towns, and 7 to 12 for 2 towns. I mean, if you, in the example I'm giving you. There's one of those in the state. It's in Huntington. Huntington chose not to join the new modified union school district at Mount Mansfield. So there's, I don't know, 6 towns, I think, that are part of Mount Mansfield Union High School. 5 of those towns' elementary programs are now overseen by that same school board. So it's now 5 elementaries and the Union Junior Senior High School. And then Huntington actually only oversees pre-K to 4 with their own school board. That's a modified unified union. You could do that here. So, I mean, it's conceivable that you could decide for the, and this only relates to the towns involved in Leland and Gray. You could decide to create a unified union school instead of a pre-K to 12, for example.
Does that count as one of the pre-K through 12
Side by
sides?
side?
Yes.
That is a very good
I should
question.
have followed that up. but
I think it probably does, because it
Because
covers
it's part
pre-K
of
to 12, but
156.
we should
You should confirm that.
qualify for one side. Side by side. I will remember what these notes mean later, so trust me. Okay, good question. Okay, so let's talk about the what happens between now and the next meeting. So I'm going to redo the criteria list and include the stuff that we talked about for criteria, try to organize them, collapse them a little bit so that it's easier to get your hands around them. At the next meeting, we will actually weight those to determine what's most important to you in sort of the final analysis. I will organize these, if possible, into everything from the option of all 10 towns become, or all 10 districts become a single district, all the way down to the not taking any action option, or the proposed sustaining the current structure option, and everything in between, and I'll try to organize them into 5 or 6 different options, some of which will have permutations, so it could either include Reedsboro or not. I mean, the question of whether Reedsboro is in it or not is not critical to saying we should have this option. We'll have to decide that at some point. So I'll try to get this organized in a way that you can begin to get your hands around it. What I most need to know from you is there information before our meeting the next time that you'd like to have to further inform this discussion? The tricky part of these exploratory committees is that they're relatively brief. They're not the deep dive that you get when you start going into the creation of a study committee and you start doing the detailed analysis of everybody's budgets and the numbers of students and cost per student, and there's a lot of detail that you get into if you're thinking about going down the road. But there are some analysis that we could do, and I've already mentioned one, which would be, I think we could do some modeling of what would happen to tax rates if you proceeded with something that by July 1st, 2017 that would qualify. You may or may not want to do it, but it's information that you can
We want to do that.
have available. So we can do that. What other kinds of data or analysis might be helpful before we meet again?
I think if you could put this together and get it out to everybody before the meeting.
Yes.
So, and the quicker we do, then if boards have a meeting before the next
talk
meeting,
about
they
it.
can get the rest of their board, and then can also start to get it out to the community, so the community can start to see it. I think that's really important. I mean, we've been trying to maintain the website so that at Wyndham Central, Stephen and Matt have done a really good job with having a place that people can go and watch the videos and see the minutes of the meetings. And I think this stuff on there too, and then if, community members have comments, they can make it to the board and it can help the boards, when they come to these meetings.
Yeah, so I'll get this out to you within the next week. So who should I, okay, I'll give you a call when I send it to you, make sure.
Yeah, make sure you call.
Yeah, okay. There were a couple other hands there, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Howie.
I understand that the state of Maine underwent a pretty similar consolidation push in their schools. It'd be nice to get some data and see how it worked out for them and what the results were.
Is that a trick question?
But a good one.
You know,
Do you not know, Howie? Well, it's widely researched and documented.
It's worked for some and it hasn't worked for others.
It's loved by some and hated by others, so.
and the only place, I mean, I think the issue, the issue of whether the model worked and the way they handled it and the role of the governor and all that stuff, I mean, it's just, it doesn't really, it is what it is, and you can read about it if you Google Maine and consolidation. It was complicated and messy in a lot of places. What I was going to suggest is that somebody asked for wanting to know what other people have done, where it's worked, or what models people have used. I think from that, I think that's something we can gather some information for you on, as opposed to sort of how they approach the passage of their law. Good.
So along the lines of Howie's question, though, and bringing in information about how it's working in other places, it would be great, I think, to bring in information about how it's working, 5 years down the line in other places, not necessarily the folks that did it last year.
Yep.
Several years experience. Okay. Other information or analysis that you feel like you need at this stage of the game? We may not be able, there may be limits, but go ahead, Frank.
Last week I presented data to the Leland and Gray School Board about equity in Bennington and Wyndham counties as compared to the state of Vermont, where the student distribution is students eligible for free meals and students eligible for special education, and their proportions in the public and independent schools. And I think that would be very informative for...
Is that available generally to folks now? Is that
online on the principal's report?
It's online.
Leland and Gray. If the board chooses, I can send it out to everybody directly, email.
Okay. Why don't we?
Public document.
Yeah. Why don't we circulate that with the packet? Okay. Thank you, Doreen. Anything else people want before we talk next time? All right, it's a lot, and it's especially a lot when we didn't start off with a conversation about what the benefits for students. Next time we will be going back to that place to start the discussion about what's next. So I will get the information out to you well in advance so that folks can really give it some thought, and if you want to talk in your boards about it. The only thing I would just say to you, which I know goes without saying, the beauty of what you've all been doing is that there's a lot of conversation and a lot of thinking that's gone on about these issues, and it's very difficult for all of you who serve on boards, and it's especially difficult for the average citizen who's getting bits and pieces of this to try to make sense out of it. I think part of our task is to get this in a form where it starts to make more sense to folks in terms of, oh, okay, so these are sort of the options that are in front of us, as opposed to these are the options that are in front of us. It's hard for people to sort of grasp, like, where do you even start? So you all have this small task of trying to define the issues and narrow the choices. Stephen, you want to make a last statement?
Well, I do.
In fact, we should have had you
Kind of a
start
little
off
piece
with
of,
your...
yeah, I should have started with this. So, I wear my cow tie here, right? And you all got a little cow there. 6.5 years ago, I presented a cow to each of your boards, and they're still wandering around in my office. They're actually there. I kind of keep them on the same table, so they kind of stay together. I haven't lost any, but well, Winho, I lost Winho. They went, yeah. But anyway, I'm just saying that you notice the cows right now. They're kind of looking, and they're not looking the same direction, and some of them feel like maybe you turned yours over there. Yeah, but at any rate, I want to make sure that people viewing this video would have some explanation for these cows sitting around the table, and you're looking for greener pastures, both individually and collectively, and how you can sustain those greener pastures for your students. So that's it.
I love Steve. Okay, thank you all. The next meeting is the 18th. Yeah, go ahead.
So listen, hey folks,
back to Rick.
really important. So one of the things that happened is, we tried Laura Skyping last time, the voice from God above, and it was, it was okay as long as she was muted, unless she wanted to talk. But, there's some other people that wish they'd known about that. So Joe says it's really easy to set up the Skype. So if there's anybody, and Stephen, we should put it out with the agenda too. So how to call, or what you have to do to be able to Skype, because to me, Skyping is about the same as nuclear fission. I don't know it, don't understand it, so whatever.
Explain to you the gravitational waves.
So I'll just say, I just came off of a 3-hour electronic meeting. I would not recommend it as your first choice. That's all. I think it's great to have an option to do it, and the reason why I did it was because I had to be here. I couldn't be in Montpelier and here at the same time. But it is not the best way to do it, and I'm sure, Laura, you agree with that.
I absolutely would agree, and I absolutely very strongly feel that we have to make it available
I do too.
and published for every meeting, because these discussions are too
So,
critical.
Joe's gonna tell
Before
us
you go too far down this path, Skype is not too bad with 3 or 4 people, depending on your internet connection. And ours is fairly robust here at the high school if I use their computer system and we keep video out of it. But I don't know what the limits of this system are. We would have to explore that with Matt Martin or some of the tech people here. I mean, it was not a problem to have 2 people Skyped in here. I don't know if I'm not sure we could have 10 people and a bunch of other boards
I
and
would
some
just hope that
community
as long
members and,
as the boards, each board in Wyndham Central, if they have members that can't make it because they can't be here and they want to Skype in, I think it would be important. And we also have the phone, and how does the phone would just be?
The phone is terrible in terms of
It's really hard to hear.
two-way communication.
Too far away.
There are solutions.
Yeah.
This is a solvable problem.
Mhm.
What is the least painful means of people being able to participate? I think it's something that if we decide that that's critical to us, we will find the best way to
Needs to be an option.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on another board of the New England Translators Association, and we use Skype for board meetings very regularly, sometimes with and most of the times without video, just audio. They work perfectly well. There's at least 7 members on that board, and there was never much of a glitch. For larger groups, any meeting is very effective and works really well, and has been used even for monthly programming with audiences of up to 50 in our situation, and they work with up to 100. So there are definite options for that, and they're pretty stable as long as, and I thought that was a very stable internet connection in this building, so I don't understand the delay.
I look into it, it's usually the ones that go past the 5 or something like that with Skype. On your free is a go-to-meeting thing and a separate kind of subscription and fee, so I can look into this, but obviously I'll be soliciting how many people are interested in doing it before I commit to exploring setting it up. I mean, I'm familiar with meeting on a board, executive board of the Vermont School Professional Educators Board, Standards Board, and that is by, not Skype, it looks the same, but it is a go-to-meeting, Centric's platform. And the compilation there is that people don't know, they can be on it by both audio and visual, if they have a proper connection at their end, bandwidth at their end. And then the challenge is for them to know what their code is and what meeting they're conferencing with and so forth. It's doable, but without experience, it's not, I'm just preparing you for the glitches.
I want to say, Rich.
So Stephen, you're the man.
Yes, I
Get
can get
it,
it.
so just make sure the agenda's out by Wednesday, and then just put in there, those that cannot make the meeting and would like to Skype in, or like to somehow attend, report back to you, so you can, and then you can get this stuff out.
So I would just, with my regional economic development hat on, one of the most widely underutilized tremendous assets that we have in this region, every single one of our schools is connected to incredibly high-speed fiber, the type of fiber that is excellent for reliable video conferencing. And so we don't know how to use it because we haven't had it, and it's not something that we're used to using. But it is an incredible asset. I would like to suggest that this is something we should prioritize for figuring out how to use and really cutting down on the challenges in our rural mountain winter towns to participating.
Yeah, and now I would call attention to, in your criteria brainstorm list, one of them was better use of the fiber. We could model that ourselves here.
Yes, we could.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
We got one other piece of business.
Just dates, the next meeting was agreed upon at the last meeting, which is the 18th, Monday, the 18th of April. Steve and I talked earlier about the possibility of the 11th of May being the 4th one and potentially last one. Obviously, there's lots of work to be done, but for this particular phase, and then you have a full meeting of your SU on the 25th of May. And the hope would be that you'd be in.
That's the VSBA board meeting, and also, we were trying to shoot for a Monday still, so that in case legislation's still in session, who knows? It may stay till July, I heard, this year.
Obviously, you're calling them, but we should probably set aside a May date, just so we've got it.
The 11th is VSBA meeting?
Laura and
Okay, so you want to go for Monday, the 9th?
Well, no, we can, if legislature's gonna be out, we just wanna allow the legislators that have been here, because we thought that was really valuable, so they can see the issues we're having, so.
So the
You want it?
16th, Monday, the 16th is a Dover meeting, and I think there are 2 meetings on the previous Monday.
Well, Dover will do away with our meeting to allow you, Wyndham Central to meet, that's no big issue,
Okay, so the 16th, you want to make it?
if that's good with other people.
Everybody,
Steve Dell's
everybody mark
important
your
one in
papers,
that
can you
one.
make it? 16th Monday.
Yes. I can, well, let me, hold on a second.
Check yours.
16th is the,
No. This one's the 18th.
Well, hang on,
oh, let's see, yes.
it'll be nicer weather, I promise, there'll be no snow, Steve.
Why do I have down here WCSU, May
Is that-
16th? Yes.
Okay,
I'm on.
is everybody okay with May 16th?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, so
Peter, you got it down, right?
Ken's motion is carries and Laura seconded it and everybody says let's get out of here.
All right.
Bill's gone.